Hey, Dean, where's my video? I
Okay.
was like, looking on the videos on your computer, not mine.
Okay,
So,
great. Thank you.
um, so here, dollars out versus dollars in. So what we're doing here is what we call our initial setup. So our initial setup, what we're going to do is put our 9 here. And again, a couple ways to proceed. One way to proceed is to memorize things. Now, I would warn you, if you go down the memory road, the amount of things you're going to have to memorize is going to continue to compound.
Yeah.
If you don't want to, if you want to memorize something, the best thing you could possibly memorize is call up, put down. Call up, put down. That's a great memory aid device. Call up. The break even in call contracts is going to be the strike price
Yeah.
plus the premium. I'm going to illustrate that to you in just a sec, but it's going to be the strike price plus the premium. So in our example, the strike price is 180. The premium is 9. And so our break even here is going to be 189. Now, people don't do things to break even. People do things to make money. But I'm just illustrating that indeed, if you exercise this contract, which you can do anytime, that's important, anytime. So what kind of a style of exercise is it when we say you can exercise anytime?
That's American.
Right on, American style, very testable. Right. So if we are struggling in options, as I said, we want to make sure we get the recognition questions right. Those are just things we simply know that American style means you can exercise anytime you'd like. European style means you can only exercise at expiration. Right. So American style is typical of equity options. So, anyways, I can exercise anytime. Now, all I'm simply illustrating here that is indeed, if we get good at the T, I can prove that that's the break even. So one thing I could do is I can get the setup correctly. Now I can just shop my answer set on the test if I don't want to memorize and say, okay, well, they offer me 189. Let me plug that in as a break even that's being offered to me. And indeed, that makes the columns balance because break even is the same dollars out as dollars in. If we buy Apple at 180, we sell Apple at 189. We make 9 points. We spent 9 points. We break even. Nobody does things to break even. What we're trying to do is make some money.
Yeah.
And so this is a bullish transaction. This is a bullish transaction.
Yeah.
By the way, you can kind of think that out and say, okay, well, I wouldn't want to buy the stock unless I thought the stock was going up. So that means if we're going to memorize break evens, kind of helpful because if we want to memorize break evens, we know any price above here, we're going to make money. And any price below here, we're going to lose money. So kind of helpful to know where that break even is and then know whether we're bullish or bearish so we can make that comparison. And so here, this is a bullish transaction. We have 2 types of contracts, calls and puts. You can buy them or sell them. All right, so let's put this in test phraseology. Your customer buys 1 Apple, December 180 call at 9, when Apple's at 180. At expiration, Apple's 198. At expiration, Apple is 198. So we said one thing you can do is you can just simply compare the break even of 198 and say, gee, that's 9 points in the right direction. So I'm going to make 9 points or $900. At expiration, we know that you're going to exercise the 180 call because even if you didn't, your broker dealer would do it for you. Why would you walk away from a choice to buy at 180? Apple stock currently trading at 198. So we're going to exercise that for you. And that's just another way of illustrating that indeed you're a winner. You're a winner because you got more money in than what? Money out.
Yeah.
By the way, you're also a big time winner because you were right about three things. When you buy options, you got to be right about three things. Direction, you were right, Apple went up. You got to be right about how far up because you got to cover your out-of-pocket costs, which in this case is 9 points. I joke, if I really wanted to teach you options, I'd make you buy one. Once you were out of pocket, you'd figure out pretty quickly how this game works, right?
Yeah.
So you got to cover your out-of-pocket costs, and you were right about the timing. You said all this was going to take place between now and the third Friday in December at 11:59 p.m. So you're a big time winner. PS could have been better. I mean, the Apple could be, who knows what the Apple might be. I mean, there's a finite supply of Apple. There's a potential infinite demand. So the Apple could be 210. The Apple could be 220. And so, long calls are pretty cool. Long calls are pretty cool. And the reason they're pretty cool is because you have unlimited gain potential. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I say, hey, how with as little as $900 would you like to control thousands of dollars worth of stock? How with limited risk would you like unlimited reward? Now, be careful. I'm not asking what can happen to you, the player. What can happen to an Apple call contract? And one thing I just showed you is that the contract can be exercised. And so that's one thing that can happen to an option contract. And here, the reason the contract was exercised
It expired.
is because it had intrinsic value, right? So we know that if Apple is somewhere north of 180, it's going to get exercised. So we're looking at 198, right? And we knew that if expiration, Apple was 198, the contract would be exercised. If at expiration, the contract has intrinsic value, the contract will be exercised. So what I'm saying here is I'm not under an obligation on your exam to tell you whether or not the contract was exercised. In other words, you should be able to, kind of figure that out based on this concept of intrinsic value. But another thing that can happen to an option contract is it can be traded, right? And so intellectually, I'm about to give you the same question. So let's just review the question I gave you previously. Your client bought one Apple December 180:9. They could have said long owner holder. That all means the same thing. Your customer's owning or holding or went long. Anyways, your customer buys one Apple December 180:9 when Apple's at 180. At expiration, Apple's 198. And we said, oh, that looks pretty good. And we plugged that in there and we said, boom, I'm a winner. But intellectually, this is the same question. But instead of saying at expiration, I say several weeks later. Several weeks later. So time clock question. And so now we're going to be looking at trading here. And very important that we know that when we're trading an option, that we originally did an opening transaction. So here we did an opening purchase. Opening purchases are used to establish or add to a long position. That alone is a test question. They could say on the test, which of the following orders would be used to establish or add to a long position? If you ever come out to Vegas, look up Dean on Friday night, you can find me at the casino. And so on Friday night, I start with a couple cocktails, I have a nice dinner, and then I go to the cage and I do an opening purchase. I buy chips, dollars out. Then I go play, and when I get ready to go home, I do a closing sale. What I'm hoping is I got more money in than what?
Yeah.
money out. So the way we're going to offset this, and again, very testable, is we might do a closing sale. What I'm working up to is, again, the same question intellectually, just phrased a little different. So I'm going to work up to some phraseology, but we're still going to be a winner here. And a closing sale is used to eliminate or reduce or offset a long position. You know, types of orders are testable. Types of orders are testable. In other words, what I'm telling you is this could be an ABC format, and you just got to come up with the right thing. How do you offset this? All right, so now we're ready to do the same question, but different phraseology. Your customer buys one Apple December 180 call for 9 when Apple's at 180. Several weeks later, so please note, I didn't say at expiration. I said several weeks later, with Apple at 198, he closes out for intrinsic value. You close out for intrinsic value. Now, intellectually, that is the same question. But instead of saying at expiration, we're now saying that you're going to close it out. You're going to trade it, which would be something else you can do. Now, that's why this intrinsic value is important, because if you don't know intrinsic value, you won't be able to close this out. You'll just be staring at it going, I don't know, right? Now, in the real world, you would actually be able to sell that for more than the intrinsic value, because in the real world, there'd be some time value as well. But on the test, they say you close it out for intrinsic value. So a call has intrinsic value. Again, great memory, a call up. When the market price is up from the strike price, it has intrinsic value. Or another way to answer the question is it likely somebody wants to buy Apple at 180 when it's at 198? The answer is yes. So the intrinsic value there is 18 points. Another way of saying you made 9. Now, P.S., that's why people trade options. Please note, the guy who bought the Apple at 180, which is what the stock is at today, and sold the Apple at 198, made 18 points. You only made 9, but you only put up 9 to make the 9. You doubled your money, right? You doubled your money. And that's another reason people buy options, right? Leverage, making a little money, do a lot. Now, remember, the guy who buys the stock only has to be right about one thing: direction up. If you buy an Apple call, you got to be right about 3 things: direction up, how far up. You said at least 9 points up from 180 to cover your out-of-pocket costs, and you got 18 points up. Woohoo! That's pretty cool. Could have been better. Right? It could be, 210. You have unlimited reward potential. There is no ceiling here. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. All right. So, so far we've done the good news. The bad news.
Sorry, for intrinsic value, it doesn't, premium never comes into the equation.
That's right. That's exactly right. All I'm asking when I ask you intrinsic value is the relationship of the market price to the strike price. Good question. Right? I'm just asking you, what is the relationship of 180 to 198? Right? We already took into account the premium there. And now we're saying we're making you work for this. We don't want to say on the test, you bought it at 9, you sold it at 18. They're making you work for that 18 by saying you close it out for intrinsic value. Now, be careful. Had I asked you what is the intrinsic value, that would be a different question. You would tell me 18. That was not the question. The question is, if you close it out for that number, what is the gain or loss? So those are different questions. So just be real careful about whether I'm asking you what is the gain or loss, because that is a question about the investor, or whether I'm just asking you simply about this relationship. Right? So those are different questions. So as I said, that's part of the conversation we had as your tutor earlier about you got to get, good at base so that you can kind of, when you're getting questions, say, okay, is this a question about the 18 Or is this a question about what happens if I close it out at that number? Right, because those are different questions. You know, if I ask you what is the intrinsic value of a 180 call with Apple 198, the answer is 18. If I say what is the profit or loss if a customer closes out an Apple 180 call for intrinsic value when Apple's at 198, then the answer is 9. Right? Because you paid 9 for a contract that's now worth 18. By the way, just getting in the weeds a little bit. But when we initially opened up this transaction, Apple was 180 and you paid 9 points. You had no intrinsic value. You paid what was called time value. You paid 9 points for a choice to buy Apple at 180 with Apple at 180. If I were your broker, I'd say, Cam, we got to turn the time value into intrinsic value. Because, you know, the time value is going to go poof.
Right.
If you're a baby broker in my firm, you're going to trade options. I'd make you write 1,000 times. Options are a wasting asset. Time value erodes. At expiration, an option is only going to be worth its intrinsic value. If it has intrinsic value, the contract will be exercised. If it has no intrinsic value, the contract will expire worthless. All right, so we looked at that same example of trading. All right, so let's go back now to our setup. So here's our setup. Right, we have our position. We've got our initial setup. And now we say, your customer buys one Apple December 180 call at 9 when Apple's 180. At expiration, Apple remains unchanged. So when we did the trade, Apple was 180, and now it says at expiration, Apple was 180. And so your choice to buy 180 doesn't have any intrinsic value. You know, that contract is going to expire.
Yeah, there's no point.
That's right. You know, that's the worst case scenario. I mean, it's pretty easy to qualify somebody who wants to trade an option. I say, is this money you can afford to lose? You know, there's a floor here at 180 or lower, the contract's going to expire. Okay. And, you know, again, it's not a big deal. It's just something, you know, whether it's, you know, this shouldn't be your rent money is what we're saying, is this should be your kind of your play money.
Yeah.
For everybody, that's a different number, right? I mean,
yeah.
You know, I joke, right? When I go to the casino on Friday, they don't do any data gathering. They don't have any obligation to know their customer.
Yeah.
They don't say, hey, Dean, you know, why don't you read this gambling disclosure document about all the bad things that can happen to you out on the casino floor? And not only do they not do that, they say, hey, Dean, here's some free adult beverages to help you with your math and judgment skills while you're here this evening. I say, thank you very much. Now, that would be our worst case here. And a good memory aid device is T. The option contract can be traded. The contract can be exercised, or the contract will expire. That's how every question is going to end. As we said here about expiration, if at expiration, the contract has no intrinsic value, the contract will expire worthless. Now, is that good news or bad news? It depends. If you bought it, it's going to be bad news. But again, that's not as bad as buying the Apple stock. What I mean by that is, you know, you buy the Apple stock, the floor is 0. You know, here the floor is 180 or less. You know, the contracts expire worthless and you lose this money. And again, pretty easy to qualify. Yeah, just say, hey, you know, is this money you can afford to lose? You know, for everybody, that's a different number, right? Now, again, you could put 900 in there, but I would put the 9. And that's a good thing. The maximum loss is the premium. So pretty easy, again, to qualify somebody who wants to buy an option position. I simply say, is this the money you can do? Now, we can express that as 9 points. They won't express it as both on the test, but we could also express that as 9 points on one contract. And each of these contracts cover 100 shares. That's called the multiplier. And so that would be another way that we could express that 9 points. As I mentioned on the test, they would not give you both of those.
I
Now,
saw a question. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
I saw a question earlier. It was in my exam. I can't remember if I got it right or not, or wrong. I haven't gone over the questions just yet, but I think it said 9S, and then it was,
Well, S usually, if we see just it's like learning a foreign language, right? They say when you dream the foreign language, it's when you know the foreign language. And so usually that would be a reference to a bonds coupon. So when I say the nines of 2020,
yeah.
in bond speak means the 9% coupon. So
Oh,
I work the bond desk. I say, hey, well, what are you looking at a quote for the nines of 2030? And that means the nines mean 9%. That's the coupon.
okay. Yeah, that's what I guessed actually.
Yeah.
But for some
Well,
for some
by
reason
the
that
way,
reminded me of that.
by the way, though, remember it's not a transaction; it's a relationship. So you're more than welcome to cut and paste it, send it to me. If it's a Kaplan, you just give me the QID because I can bring it up backstage. But yeah, just like I say, that's what we were talking about. We got to lay some more base.
Right, right.
We got to get to where you're looking at a question, you kind of know what those parameters are. Now in the exam, they won't ever give you a choice between 9 points or $900. They certainly do it. Now I've said that there are two types of contracts, and the two types of contracts we have are calls. What happened? I don't know what happened there. There we go. And puts. And you can either buy them or you can sell them. So boom, there's our Apple. And Apple can go to infinity. So here's our market price of Apple. To infinity and beyond. Here is our strike price of Apple. XP just means strike price. And let's put that there, boom. And we said that our break even, we are 9 points out of pocket. So there is our break even of 189. And what we said is that we want the Apple to be above that. If that Apple goes above that, we're going to be a winner, right? So we want Apple to go
Yeah.
We don't want Apple
Yeah.
pretty bad. Won't give up my day job. But every contract has two parties. Every contract has two parties. So options are a zero-sum game. So everything's the opposite, right? So if we have two types of contracts, calls and puts, and you can either buy them or sell them, what that means is we have four basic option positions. And I've showed you here our first option position, which is a long call. And what I would like to kind of get started on here is what we call the options matrix. And so our first position is a long call. And, if you get good at the options matrix, it's not a box with four squares. It's an options matrix. So here's our long call. And I say, what can you tell me about a long call? You say, well, Dean, when you're long a call, you have paid a premium. You have paid a premium, and you have a choice to buy the stock. And you say, Dina, your max loss whenever you buy an option position, whether you buy a call, you buy a put, you buy a straddle, you buy a spread, whenever you buy an option position, your max loss is the premium.
Yep.
and your max gain is unlimited.
Yeah, I remember for my SIE test, I actually, what you're doing now,
Yeah,
I wrote that whole thing down on my
I like
little.
it because what the matrix does is it turns judgment questions in aim and shoot, right?
Yeah,
And
no, it
I
did.
wouldn't
It
want to
helped
buy
so
the
much.
stock unless I thought the stock was going up. So this is a bullish transaction. And my break even is going to be strike price plus premium, call up. And again, where we're heading now is we're going to head to the other side of that matrix. And, for every contract, there's two parties, right? So my break even is strike price plus premium. And that was our 189, right? That was that price. Visually, that's what's going on. And what I'm showing you here is a visual representation of the strategy, right?
From knowing this this matrix, how many questions would you say just from
Oh,
this alone?
wow. I'll tell you what, I think the matrix can do pretty much everything except the hedges. So, I think you'd be in pretty good shape. I would think I come in,
Okay.
I do my matrix, I have that in front of me of the 20, maybe it handles 12. And then remember, the other ones could be recognition and,
Yeah.
so the matrix wouldn't matter for, do it's 11:59 p.m. So I'm a big fan of that. Even if data dump sheet. If you come in and you do your data, I call it data dump sheet. I certainly have the matrix. So I take a sheet of paper, fold it in fours, right? And then unfold it. And that would be my matrix. And we've got our first quadrant.
Yeah.
And the other reason I love it is because where we're heading is we know that whatever we say here, this is going to be the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then here's going to be our put, our long put. Here's going to be our short put. And here we just did this part of the matrix. And so even if it wasn't productive, I think it is, but I just think it helps your mind kind of calm down by doing that when you come into the exam. You come into the exam, you do a data dump sheet with a matrix or a teeter-totter or whatever. I don't think it's necessary, but it sometimes just has a nice calming effect, so to speak, where your brain says, okay, I'm here to do series 7, because it's not a natural circadian rhythm to kind of, wake up and start thinking series 7 stuff. I mean, that's just not kind of a natural place to be.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to go over here and we'll just do it, right? So if we go over here, what I'm going to show you next is we're going to be short a call. And what's neat about shorting the call is if we have that part already, we know we're going to be receiving the premium. We wouldn't agree to do anything unless you pay me some money. So, I always think of people who are short options as potential victims. And if you don't want to be a potential victim, well, then don't, collect the money. So that's an obligation to sell the stock. You wouldn't want to sell the stock unless you thought the stock was going down. And every time we cross the matrix, it's not a box of 4 squares, the gains and the losses are going to change. Because, again, it's zero sum. So boom and boom. One man's dream is the other nightmare. So now the best case is you agree to be a potential victim and nobody victimizes you. And you get to keep the money. Ah, neener, neener, neener. By the way, that's a common theme. Narrative thread. You don't get many common themes or narrative threads, but one of them is anytime you collect money, whether it's a short call, short put, short straddle, short spread, the best case is contract or contracts expire. You keep the money, neener, 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 and you walk. I think it was like an insurance company, right? I pay my insurance company a premium. I have a contract with them. They're the writer, right? I'm the one who's holding the contract. They're the one who's short that contract. And they say, Dean, for this premium, if something happens, we'll take care of it. Yeah. Now, what the best news would be, Dean doesn't file a claim. If I never file a claim, then they just keep the money. Right.
Yeah.
Worst case is Dean files a claim, right? And then they have to, make good. And if they give me grief, I'm going to say, well, gee, That was the deal, right? The deal was that, if, something happens, you're going to take care of it. I've reading where a lot of insurance companies now are saying, sorry, we don't want to take that risk. So we're not going to write that policy. Now, if I come into your office and say, I want to lose so much money, then you in advance can't tell me how much. You say, Dean, if you agree to sell stock you don't own,
Yeah, that's
that will
dangerous.
do the trick. So there's two versions of a call contract. One is where I agree to sell stock I have. And another one is where I agree to sell stock I don't have.
Naked.
So every contract has two parties with opposite expectations. Every option contract has two parties with opposite expectations. All right, so boom. And so here we go. Now we're going to put this one on the board here. So we short or sell. We'll put that in green. Yeah, and again, you can do it any way you want. I always think when I hear the word sell, potential victim. And nobody's going to agree to be a potential victim unless you give them some money. So sell one Apple December 180 call at 9 when Apple's 180. Now, again, I always, as part of my process, I like to write underneath the contract, what am I looking at? So what I like to do is underneath the contract on my official, Prometric scratch paper, say, what am I looking at? What I'm looking at here is an obligation to sell the stock at the strike price. That's what I'm looking at there. So I like to put that there just to kind of help my mind. And again, we're looking now at the opposite of what we did over here. This is what we did. And for every strategy, there's an opposite. And so now we're going to be over here. And I'm just trying to clean up my thing. There we go. All right. So your customer, now we'll put it in test phraseology. Your customer sells one Apple December 180 call at 9 when Apple's at 180. Now, again, I think a good mnemonic is T. We know that every option question is going to end with either the contract got traded, the contract got exercised, or the contract expired. And P.S., I'm under no obligation to tell you that. In other words, what I mean, at some point, based on your, continuing to work, you should be able to tell me whether this 180 call gets traded or expired based on the context of the question. But as I said, what we want to always do is our initial setup. So I always say, fire up the T, right? So the first thing we want to do is say, okay, well, what we did here, very testable, is an opening sale. It is very testable types of orders. And the way we establish a short position, opening sales, test question, are used to establish or add to a short position. Again, I like my casino analogy, right? When I come into the cage and I do my opening purchase, from the casino's perspective, that's an opening sale, right? They're collecting money in. And again, it's kind of a zero-sum game there on the casino, right? I mean, either Dean's going to win or Dean's going to lose. And if I lose, that for me is bad news, but for the casino, that's going to be what? Good news, right?
Yeah.
And if I win, that's good news for me and, bad news for the casino. So here, this is going to be 9 in. So we're going to put that there. What I'm trying to illustrate here is that We don't really have to memorize a whole lot of stuff because the break even is the same whether you're long or short. It's always going to be call up. What's going to be different is whether you want that number to be above or below. Do you want Apple to be above or below? But it's still the same break even. The break even is still going to be 189. I'm just going to illustrate that to you presently, right? So what I mean by illustrating that to you, I'm just going to illustrate that the break even is indeed 189, because now remember, they're going to be offering you certain choices on the test about the break even, right? And so here, what I have is an obligation to sell Apple at 180. That's what I have an obligation to do. And so they offer me on my test several answers as potential break evens. And they offer me 189. I said, well, let me try that out and see what happens. If I buy the stock at 189 and I deliver at 180, yeah, that works. I have the same dollars out as dollars in, right? That would be a good thing. Now, nobody does things to break even. Nobody does things to break even. But yeah, it could be worse. It's a push, like in betting. That would be where Dean walks out with the same number of chips I cashed in, right? I bought $1,000 worth of chips and I cash out for $1,000. And the casino doesn't win. I don't win. Nobody wins or loses. Well, we don't do that. We're trying to do things to make money. Now, we said the next test question is, are you bullish or bearish? Are you bullish or bearish? And so here again, one way we can go about that is we can say, okay, well, selling the stock is bearish.
Yeah.
So we want the stock to be down from that break even of 189. So it's the same break even for both parties. It's just where do you want it in relationship to that? And again, the point here is that if you're short the call, you're going to want it below that number. And again, we might want to make a little arrow just to remind ourselves, where we want that in relationship to that break even. Now, again, the reason I said that's helpful is because if we go down the memory road, now we can just memorize and compare and say, okay, well, 187 should be good news because it's 2 points in the right direction. Now, the other way you could do that is you could go to the T, which I think is longer term a better way to proceed. But if you get good at the T, you can simply plug that in and say, yeah, that works. So I buy the stock at 187, I sell at 180, I lose 7 points, but I got 9. So I still got more money in than money out. So I'm still a winner. I'm still a winner. So that's why one of the reasons, if we have time, you have a couple of weeks, but what happens with options is the lights go on and they go out again and they go on again. And, you just got to keep working on getting the light lit and keeping it lit. So, and that comes with practice, drilling, rehearsing. Now, you shouldn't be struggling with max gain on short options. So anytime we're on this side of the matrix, the short side, short a call or short a put, the best case scenario is we agree to be a potential victim and nobody victimizes us. Again, what Dean thinks isn't a test question. But I like to think of options as being about floors and ceilings. Floors and ceilings. There's a floor here, 180. 180 or lower, the contract has no intrinsic value and the contract would expire worthless. So if expiration of Apple is 180 or lower, contract expires worthless. And you go neener. That would be the best case scenario. The best case scenario is you agree to be a potential victim. Nobody victimizes you. And you get to keep the money.
But it's unlimited the other way.
Yeah, and that's very much a test question. I mean, this is like picking up nickels in front of bulldozers, not a smart move. right? I mean, you know, I hope that 900 is meaningful to you because, you know, for example, I showed you at the expiration a price of 198. And as you recall, that price at 198 for the guy that was over here was a dreamy price. You know, I call you and I say, hey, you know that Apple 180 call you wrote naked, uncovered? I mean, you know, if you're outside the privacy of your own home naked, uncovered, are bad things or good things likely happen? Bad things. In fact, so I say, why don't you cover yourself? And so here you say, well, Dean, what if I had the stock? I said, well, if you had the stock, we wouldn't be having the discussion right now. You know, I would have just delivered it and, you know, that would be the end of it.
Yeah.
And you say, well, Dean, do you know where I can get the stock? I say, I do. Every day between 9:30 and 4 o'clock, there's a market where buyers and sellers of Apple come together. And you need to buy Apple. And you say, well, Dean, maybe it's less than 180. I go, again, you're confused. If it was less than 180, we wouldn't be having this discussion right now. You say, what's the stock? And I say, it's at 198. So we're going to have to buy it at 198 and deliver at the strike price of 180. And you say, well, geez, Dean, thank God it couldn't again got worser. I go, well, you're confused, my friend. It could have got worser, right? That stock could be 205. There is no ceiling here, right? So in terms of my little visual representation over here, there's no ceiling. There's a, you know, there's a floor, but there is no ceiling over there. And so, you know, it's very important to know the kind of things that can expose clients to unlimited risk. And, you know, that's one of them, right? That's one. Doing this is very, very foolish. Now, that kind of leads us into a discussion of what would be smarter. What would be smarter is a covered call or what we call a credit call spread, where we take some of our 9 points and maybe buy a 190 call just in case. And that's kind of where, you know, where advanced options come in, where we're on basic options. So far, what I've shown you is the long call, short call. We have two types of contracts, calls and puts. You can either buy them or sell them. So that means we have 4 basic option positions. We have long call, short call, and we've got long put and short put.
And that for just a regular option, it's exercised at T+2 and
love that. So let's just talk about the option contract itself. So, you know, here's our example we're just doing. That 900 is going to show up in your account on T+1. Option contract settle T+1. So if you bought it, it'd be debited from your account. So you call me and say, hey, Dean, what's that $900 credit in my account? I said, well, remember, you sold the 180 call, and that's the 9 points from that. Now, if you get exercised, or exercise, our example means you're going to have to deliver the stock at 180. And that is going to be T+2. So in fact, you know, because that's going to be a stock trade. And this 198 is going to be T+2. Let's just put this in here just to remind ourselves. So your point, I think it's a valid one, is that option contracts are T+1. That's the settlement on an option contract. And then the stock trades are going to be T+2. Now, there is an exception, so I want to a testable exception. So let's call this choice A. And I give you an answer set that looks like this, and this was your question. And, you know, Dean, I didn't blow you off. I said, nah, let's talk about that. So that's kind of a hint when Dean, you know, kind of says, yeah, that's a good point. Let's talk some more. All right. So I would, if I say what best describes settlement of option contracts and resulting stock exercise, you would say T+1, T+2. But there is an exception where B is going to be the correct answer. It's not the correct answer in what I just asked you, but B could have been the right answer for index options. Index options, the option contracts and the exercise are both T+1. Kind of makes sense because there's no resulting stock trade.
They're European style, aren't they?
That's right. And European style, remember, means it only happens on expiration. So, the vast majority of the times on the test, this is going to be the right answer.
Yeah.
Unless I ask you about an index option, then, it's going to be that's going to be the right answer. So,
I know.
one of the challenges on the test, by the way, is, the people who write tests, distractors are the technical name for wrong answers.
Yeah.
And, one of the challenges is almost all the distractors are right answers to different questions. So, what you first got to do is kind of stuff this stuff up in your brain housing group, and then you got to work on delineating it, right?
Yeah.
That's the challenge. First you got to get it up there, and then you got to work on delineating it. All right, so let's look at there's my market price line, and we looked at in here that market price line. We looked at some call contracts, and now we want to look at some put contracts. And we said we have two types of contracts, calls and puts. You can either buy or sell them. And so that means we have 4 basic option positions. And so now we're going to be looking at a put contract. And puts, again, I'm a big believer in having some kind of a process. So here we're going to sell, or go long first, long or buy 1 Apple December 180 put at 9. I say over and over and over again, don't be a dumb bear. In terms of suitability, we said that, if you're a bear, there's a lot of dumb things you can do. You could short the stock. That would subject you to unlimited risk. And if you wanted to short 100 shares of Apple, I'm going to ask you for $9 grand. You're going to have unlimited loss. Another stupid thing you could do is a naked call. You could sell the 180 calls naked. I said, well, listen, why don't we just buy an Apple put? That's a kinder, gentler way to be bearish on Apple, because if we buy a put and we're wrong, we just lose our premium.
Yeah.
And so we said that's one reason people buy options. Now, as I said, I like to underneath, particularly on the puts. It's when I'm teaching like live classes, people always are, I don't get it. I buy it to sell it. I said, well, those are different its. When you buy a put contract, dollars out, you have a choice to sell the stock. Those are different its. So here we have a choice to sell the stock at the strike price. So again, what I'm working on is my initial setup. My initial setup is going to be first to kind of get my option contract. That's called an option leg, not testable. Get my leg on my scratch paper, kind of get comfortable with what I'm looking at. And then I'm going to make my T, and this is going to be an opening purchase, very testable. Opening purchases, remember, are how we establish long positions. And so we're going to have 9 out. We could put 900. I suggest we do 9, but you can do it any way you want. The reason I don't like putting 900 is because you put the zeros in there, it gets very easy to start transposing zeros. And I just, I think it's easier to do things on a per share basis. And then, when we're all done, take a look at it. All right. So again, what we're going to be interested in is break even. We're going to be interested in bullish or bearish. We're going to be interested in max gain. And we're going to be interested in max loss. One of the things I like to do right out of the gate when I see somebody's bought an option is I just like to say, okay, well, they're out of pocket. I just like to say, okay, well, that's either a gain or a loss, depending on what they've done. And as bearish strategies go, not a bad way to go down. Because, as I said, you could be a dumb bear. So this is actually one thing I think that makes sense. We said options are all about floors and ceilings. Floors and ceilings, not testable, but I like to think of options as being about floors and ceilings. And there's a ceiling here, 180. 180 or higher, the contract just expires and you lose your money. Your choice to sell at 180 doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any economic sense unless Apple is down from 180. So, I just think that's the easiest way. I always like to get my gain or my loss. So when I buy an option, I got my loss. When I sell an option, I got my gain. And then I say, okay, from there, I can kind of, look at the rest of it. We should know that when we buy option contracts, that sounds like a bad thing, but that's a good thing, right? That you can just lose your premium. So it's kind of like buying a lottery ticket. Yeah. I kept buying options. He kept losing his money. And so I was trying to get him to understand that maybe he should do the opposite and start selling options. But his name is John. And so I started by, trying to get him to kind of mentally go where I want him to go. And I said, John, why do you keep buying all these option contracts, and they keep expiring worthless and you lose your money? And then he said, Dean, you can't win if you don't play. I said, okay, well, I'm certainly going to document his account, right? That he's a speculator. Right now we're talking about speculators. People are just speculating on the stock price of Apple, and that's okay. I mean, compliance officers are prejudicial. They prefer people who are hedgers to people who are speculators, but it is what it is, right? All right, so we got our setup. Our break even. If you only remember one thing about options, what should you remember? Call up,
Put down.
put down. Call up, put down. So our break even is going to be strike price
Minus the premium.
less premium. That's going to equal our break even. As we said, nobody does things to break even, but that's a push. And you didn't win, you didn't lose. Our strike price here is 180. And as I kind of joked, if I really want to teach you options, I make you buy one. And once you were out of pocket, you'd figure out pretty quickly, how this game works. Right. So our break even here is going to be 171. And now, like I did previously, I'm just going to illustrate that indeed that is the case. And the way I'm going to illustrate that again is by saying, okay, well, what do we have here? What we have is a choice to sell the stock at 180. That's what that means. So what you did is you paid 9 points to have a choice to sell the stock at 180. And as I told you, people get hung up on that all the time. I don't get it. I buy it to sell it. I said, when you buy a put contract, you're establishing the choice to sell the stock at the strike price. And that's that 9. So remember, break even is going to be the number that makes the columns balance, because ultimately that's what break even is. Right. So here's our choice to sell at 180. Here is our boom. And we need a number that we plug it in. Now, if you get good at the T again, the great thing is you can just shop the answer set and say, okay, what are they offering me as potential break evens? And maybe choice C says the break even's 171. I say, okay, well, let me try that out. I call this process of elimination, where I simply just plug the numbers offered to me into the box until one of the numbers makes the columns what? Balance, because that's what break even is. Break even is same dollars out as dollars in. So that's what break even is. By the way, here is our visual representation once again. Now let's get a different color here. You know, on all these strategies, you're either buying volatility or you're selling volatility. Volatility is either your friend or your enemy. Not testable, but that's what's going on. Right? So either you're wanting the movement or you don't want the movement. So there's our break even, boom. So I'm going to need 9 points down. You're here, you're buying downward volatility. In a long call, you were buying upward volatility, but now you're buying downward volatility. As I said, to make some money here, we haven't done that yet, but you got to be right about three things. You got to be right about direction. Here, you're choosing down. So again, if we go to this, right, selling the stock, and selling the stock is bearish. Now, I think that you are a smart bear, you know, because if you're wrong as a bear here, you just lose your what?
Premium.
Your premium. No, so you got to be right about three things. You got to be right about direction. Right? We're saying that your direction you're choosing is down.
Yeah.
You got to be right about how far down. As we said, you need at least 9 points because you got to cover your out-of-pocket cost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think I get this actually.
Good. Puts are the ones that, you know, so puts are usually the ones that have throw people for a loop a little bit. All right, so let's put it in test phraseology. Your customer buys one Apple December 180 put at 9. When Apple's 180, who cares? At expiration, now we care. At expiration, Apple is 162. I just made that up, just like they would on the test, right? 162. Now, we said a lot of ways to go here. One way is just to, you know, kind of compare that to your break even and say, woo, that's 9 points in the right direction. Right? And if we're looking here, we can go to our matrix and say 162. That looks pretty good. That looks like I'm going to be a happy camper there. So I could just compare that and say it's a 9-point gain. But remember, at expiration, are you going to exercise? So you have a choice to sell at 180 and Apple's at 162. So are you going to exercise your 180 put? Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're going to buy the stock in the open market at 162 and you're going to stick it to somebody at 180.
Yeah.
Now, remember, you don't make 18 points. By the way, that's the intrinsic value. That's a different question.
Yeah.
Right? You make is the difference, right? You make 9 points here. And the reason you're a big time winner is because you were right about all three things.
Yeah.
You said that going down, you said it's going at least 9. It went down 18. And you said all that was going to take place between now and December expiration. So, you know, when you're right on an option, it's like the trifecta in horse racing. It's very hard to call 3 horses in the right order. But if you do, you're a big time winner. Right now, it could have been better. How much better could it be? Well, if 162 is good, 150 is better. 110 is better. The ideal price is Apple goes to
0.
Yeah, that's nice because then you get it out of the trash can. Or 0 when you stick it to somebody, you're the putter, and you put it to somebody at 180. They say, you know that stock's worthless? I go, yeah, I just got it out of the trash can. I said, you're making me pay 180 for worthless stock? You say, yeah. I said, man, I'm going to lose 180. You go, no, Dean, you get to keep the 9. You're not falling down 180 flights of stairs. You're only falling down 171 flights of stairs. You know, it's still painful, but it's definable, right? It's not unlimited. I mean, the stock doesn't go to -5. So the best case is this goes to 0. And our max gain is going to be when the stock goes from the break even to 0. Or in this case, we're going to make $171 per share, or
less our premium.
17,100. I had a young lady, we were going over this stuff. She goes, "This is the most unchristian thing I've ever heard. I would never stick it to anybody." And I go, "Well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you don't have to play the game if you don't want to, but I mean, that's what's going on here, right? This is what this is about." Let me just show you some different phraseology. So remember, the other thing we could say, instead of at expiration, we could say several weeks later, right? Because of this idea up here that we have, right? So we know that one of 3 things is going to happen to this contract. Now, be careful. I'm not asking what's going to happen to the player. I'm asking what's going to happen to the contract. We know those are 3 things that can happen. So again, the other version of this is where we close out. And we said this is very testable to know how we close out when trading options. So we did an opening purchase. We close that out by doing a closing sale. Right. And so now we say on the test, your customer buys 1 Apple, December 180 put at 9, when Apple's at 180. With Apple at 162, your customer closes out at intrinsic value. Now, be careful what I'm asking you. If I ask you what is the intrinsic value of a 180 put with a stock at 162, that's 18 points. That's not what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
I'm asking if you close out at intrinsic value, what is the gain or loss? It's a 9-point gain, and that's pretty bueno. You spent 9, you made 9, you doubled your money. The guy who shorted the Apple at 180 made more than you. At 180, the guy would have made 18 points, but he would have had unlimited risk. So another reason people buy options, buy calls, buy puts is leverage. You can make a lot more money quickly. You're making a little money, do a lot. It's called leverage. Now, I should warn you, the same supercharged speed you make money with is the same supercharged speed you lose money with. But that's one reason people buy options, is the leverage, making that, 9 points become 27 or 36 or whatever the case may be. Now, we said that every strategy has its opposite. Every strategy has its opposite. So we've looked at a long put, but we also have short puts. Right, so we're going to look at that one next. We're going to boom. These are our 4 basic option positions. All right, we have 2 types of contracts, calls and puts. You can either buy them or sell them. So that means we have 4 basic option positions. 4 basic option positions. Just cleaning this up.
Oh, what's an example of a closing purchase?
A closing purchase is when we'll do that now. So a closing purchase is how we offset an opening sale. So right in my casino example, when I go to do my closing sale from the casinos, that's a closing purchase. They're buying back the chips. I sometimes think athletes are confused. It's not the athlete that gets traded, it's the contract. So maybe I'm a professional athlete and I sold my contract. I said I would play, football for you or basketball, whatever. You're the owner. I, Dean Tenney, agreed to play basketball for $2 million a year. That's my opening sale. That's your opening purchase. You're long my contract. And then I come to you and I say, listen, I don't want to be obligated to play basketball for you no more. I'd like to extinguish my obligation. I'd like to buy back my contract. I'd like to do a closing purchase. One of my favorite basketball players, I don't know if you would call him a basketball player or not, but he was a finance major at Yale, and he signed a $10 million contract to play center for the New York Knicks. And then they both agreed that he is not a NBA quality center. And so Chris Dudley came back to the Knicks and said, how about I buy back my contract for $2 million? And the Nick said, okay. So he did an opening sale at 10. He did a closing purchase at 2. Closing purchase is how you extinguish the obligation. Now that means he has $8 million left over. So I'm not sure if when you ask him how he became a millionaire, he says he was a professional athlete, or if he says, I sold a contract high and I bought it back what? Low, right? So if I don't want to be contractually obliged, I say, okay, well, how do I do that? I kind of joke with my friends at Kaplan, right? You did an opening purchase today for 2 hours. From my perspective, that's an opening sale, right? It was for you money out. For me, it's money in.
Right.
And if I don't want to do that, I could say, what, I really want my 2 hours back. How about I give you $300 to cut me loose? And you say, oh, Steen, I think I'm going to make $150 doing nothing. I go, yeah, that's true. You would make the buying back the contract is how I give her the obligation. But my Kaplan friends sometimes get upset because, they'll call me and I said, I hate to sound like a 3-year-old, but I am not one of your employees. If you want me to do something, you should ask me politely, because I don't like being told that I get it. You're stuck and you need somebody to cover and, you're thinking of me. I think that's wonderful. I'm glad I'm on your mind, but, I'm not a full-time Kaplan instructor. I don't want to be a full-time Kaplan instructor. And, so, why don't we try that again? Do you need my help? Okay, let's start from that perspective. That's a little better, and now they owe me some money, right? So, he's one of the big mucky mucks at Kaplan. His name is Doug. I said, listen, you need to hire some more instructors. I said, because, I'm not obliged to do anything. I mean, now once I collect the money, as you can tell, I'm a whiner, right? Once I collect the money, I'm going, oh my God, I can't believe I'm stuck doing an evening SIE class. I mean, that's not, I got better things to do at night. I'll smoke a stogie, have a cocktail, do some gambling. Right? So it doesn't speak to me. I want to be spirit-filled as your teacher on a Tuesday night. But, I told Kaplan, I said, I think I'm in the next year, I'm going to have different a fee schedule that's different. That if you want me to cover like an evening class, it's going to cost you more, or a weekend class or whatever the case may be. So your point, let's just make a note of that because it is testable. So let's put it over here. Closing purchase. And we'll put it in red because it's going to be money out. Is used to eliminate or offset or reduce. Closing purchases are used to eliminate, offset. Those are all different kinds of ways to say the same thing, on the test. Or reduce a short position. So, one of the things I always put in any of my content for SIE, any of my content for Series 7, is I always have this answer set because it is always on the test. And, someday I'm just going to write a practice test that is only answer sets with no questions. And, because that's really what it's about. As I told you, all these could be right answers to different questions. And this is very testable, and this is called types of orders. Types of orders. All right, so you just asked me about it. This is very, very much an answer set on the exam. Very much an answer set on the exam. And if I ask you on the exam, which of the following orders is used to establish or add to a long position? You would say A, an opening purchase. If on the exam I ask you which of the following types of orders would be used to establish or add to a short position, say opening sale. The only two positions we have at broker dealers are long positions and short positions. That's it. By the way, that's true of stocks as well, right? Because in our business, most businesses, if you sell things you don't own, it's called fraud, but not in our business, right? That's called a short sale. And so that's called an opening sale. If I ask which of the following orders would be used to eliminate or reduce a long position, that's a closing sale. So these two go together. By the way, that's the reason that's also important, right? Because if we're doing our T, we're going to be netting those two numbers. And then that trade and that option is either going to be a gain or loss based on the difference between those two numbers, right? And then these two always go together, right? The way we get rid of this, the way we offset, right? If I say which of the following is used to eliminate or reduce or offset a short position, these two go together, right? This is how you go short. That's how you open it. And then this is how you close it. And then we just compare these two, right? And then based on that, we know whether or not you have a taxable gain or a loss based on the difference between these two numbers.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So let's put our position up here. There's our last one of our basics. This is the last one of our basics that we're working on. And so let's put this here. Boom, boom, boom. And what I'm hoping, by the way, what I'm hoping is that at some point, you're looking at this, it's less of a struggle. So we're going to sell. The minute you hear the word sell, I would hope that as a test taker at some point, you're going, okay, potential victim. You're thinking obligation.
Yeah.
You're thinking opening sale. And then I hope when you see this, you say, okay, potential victim on 100 shares. You know, that was 10 contracts, potential victim on 1,000 shares. You know, that's 20 contracts, a potential victim on 2,000 shares. A potential victim on 100 shares of Apple. Apple's the underlying interest, the thing we're betting on. Right, I got a horse right here. His name is Paul Revere. That's not a song about a guy who owns a horse. It's a song about a guy betting on a horse, and you don't need to own the horse to bet on the horse, right? I am a potential victim on 100 shares of Apple at any time between now and the third Friday at 11:59 Eastern time in December. I'm a potential victim at $180 a share. And that is the strike price. I'm a potential victim because I collected 9 points. If I didn't want to be obliged, I shouldn't have collected the 9 points. You know, if we're going to have put-ers, we're going to have put-es. Now, as I told you, what I like to do, what Dean likes to do is not testable. But the minute I get that 9 points in, I say, okay, well, I know that when I collect money, the best case is I'm going to get to keep it. And so I'm going to go right to my max gain and say, okay, so I'm going to be a potential victim here. So the best case is I don't get victimized and I get to keep the premium. That's as good as it gets. In other words, as I keep saying, not, testable, but as I keep saying, I like to think of options as being about floors and ceilings, right? And here at 180, there is a ceiling. Nobody's going to stick the apple to me if it's at 185. I'd say you must be new. The only time they're going to stick it to me is if the apple is less than 180. And then I told you what I like to do is say, okay, what am I looking at? I'm looking at an obligation to buy the stock at the strike price. Well, I just like to put that there just to kind of get my, you're not going to run out of time on the exam. You might run out of right answers, but you're not going to run out of time.
Okay.
Right. So, you have time. I finished a tutoring session today and I was really pleased because she kept taking a strategic pause and I could tell she's kind of accessing her brain housing group and she was coming up with the right answer. And I was telling her, I think as we practice drill and rehearse, you'll get a little quicker on that. But hey, I'm not pushing to be any quicker because, every time you take that little strategic, I don't know what you're doing, where you're going, but when you're back, it's with the right answer. So that's always what, particularly on the puts, because you can get kind of turned around on them, quickly. All right. So here we go again. I left this here because I'm trying to illustrate the concept that you only need to memorize calling up and put down because it's the same whether you're long or short. It doesn't matter. It's going to be strike price less premium. What matters is where do you want it to be in relationship to that? And so if we look at this position, we say, okay, well, buying the stock means I'm bullish. And the reason that's important, because that means in relationship to the break even, I want the Apple up from there. So that's why that's kind of an important kind of thing, right? To know that in terms of your break even, same break even. So both times we've done the break even, it's been the same, whether you're long or short. 189, 171. What's been different is where do you want it in terms of the market price in relationship to that. All right, so that's our break even. We've got our max gain. All right, so what else are we going to be able to account for? Our max loss. Well, as we said, we have an obligation to buy the stock at 180. If we didn't want to buy that stock at 180, we shouldn't have collected the money. So that's going to be the worst case, is that we're going to have to pay 180 for that stock. And the worst case is we're going to pay 180 for the stock, and the stock is worthless. So the worst case is somebody sticks it to me at 180 and the stock is worthless. And that means I lose 171 points, right? I lose 17,100. So my maximum loss is when the stock goes to zero. Or, you know, the break even to zero, or 171, strike price less premium to zero, you know, whatever floats your boat, right? The maximum loss is when this goes from 171 all the way to zero. Right? Because once we go past there, we start to hemorrhage money.
Yeah.
You know, here we can take a little bit of a hit and we still have some money left over. And then why do you do this? You do this to get paid to do something you're already prepared to do. Apple today is 180. So pay attention. Apple's 180. I'm your broker. And you call me and you say, hey, Dean, I want to put in a buy limit to buy Apple today at 178. I said, so let me get this right. If you can get Apple today for 178 or lower, you want to buy it. You say, yes. Okay. I said, just want to be clear. If I call you and I tell you you paid 178 or lower, you're going to be happy. You say, yeah. I said, well, what if it goes to zero? He goes, well, Dean, I don't know why you're being so rude, but, you know, yeah, I get it. If Apple goes to zero, I'd be an unhappy person. And I say, and listen, you know, nobody has to sell to you at 178. You know, your limit order may not go off. He says, well, Dean, I don't know why you're being so rude, but where are you going with this? I said, well, listen, you told me you want to buy Apple, so why not get paid to do something you're already prepared to do? You told me you're prepared to buy Apple. What if I told you somebody will give you $900 to do what you say you want to do? You know, one reason to sell options, suitability, is to get paid to do something you're already prepared to do. You know, any strategy that Mr. Buffett thinks is probably a good strategy is not a bad one, right? So Mr. Buffett loves to sell puts on stocks he's willing to buy. And then if you put it to him, what's he say? Thank you very much. I wanted the stock anyways, right? So if somebody sticks me the Apple at, 180 and Apple's 175, I'm still a winner. I go, thank you so much, right? So this is the equivalent of a buy limit at 171. Right? I mean, if you want to buy it at 178, then 171 is better. So, you know, if I go to my registered option principal and he says, what does your client want to do? I said he wants to write puts on stocks he's willing to buy. He wants to write puts, short puts, as an alternative to a buy limit order. As an alternative, right? Why not get paid to do something you're already what? Prepared to do. P.S.
Yeah.
And if Apple, with your 178 buy limit, you don't get nothing. You know, Apple goes to 185 or 190, you don't have the stock. But here, if Apple's 180 or higher, at least you get to keep $900. You don't have the stock, but you do have the what? The premium.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's why you wouldn't do it. Now, by the way, remember, though, below 171, it's going to be a losing proposition. So you got to be a little careful because clients, I used to make all of my clients who wanted to short options sign a big boy or big girl letter, saying, okay, you understand that when you write a put, if you get exercised, you're going to be buying the stock at higher than the current market price. If you get exercised on this, you're paying 180 for Apple, and Apple's somewhere below 180. If you say you didn't get that, I'm going to whip that letter out and say, hey, isn't that your signature there that you said you were a big boy and you understood that? Same thing with a short call. Do you understand on a short call, if you get exercised, you're going to be delivering the stock at less than the current market price? Nothing wrong with that. Just something you need to, kind of own at the beginning, right? I joke, people get wobbly on you.
Yeah.
So they start going backwards on you. All right. So I've shown you the 4 basics. The other one that shows up of your 9 option strategies you're held accountable for, the vast majority on 5 of the 9 strategies: long call, short call, long put, short put, and a covered call. So what I'm going to show you right now is what's called a covered call, not a naked call. We're going to buy, we're going to buy the Apple, and we're going to write an option contract. And so we're going to buy 100 shares of Apple. Let me get a smaller font here.
Yeah, I had a question earlier actually where it gave like irrelevant information. It said someone had 500 shares of whatever Apple at 23 or something, but the option contract was only for 200 shares.
Oh yeah, there's no such as being partially naked. So I don't think it's a big deal in the test, but that's called a ratio right. A ratio right is when you write more contracts than you have stock.
Okay.
And then so like if I have 300, I can write 2, but if I have 3 and I write 4, there's no such thing as partially naked on one contract.
Okay.
So you can just get rid of doing any T or anything. You just say unlimited loss potential. So a ratio right is when you write more. A ratio right would be when we go to write here 2 contracts instead of 1. Right. And we can't do that. Well, we could, but it'd be foolish, right? Because then you'd have 1 contract that isn't covered.
Yeah.
All right. So now, again, another kind of common strategy, very testable suitability. Why do we write covered calls? We're about to generate additional income on this stock position. I say, how would you like to be paid hundreds of dollars in advance to agree to sell high stock you just bought low? Somebody will give you several $100s to agree to sell the Apple at something north of 181. We could agree to sell the Apple at 185. We could agree to sell the Apple at 190. Now the more bullish we are, the higher the strike we want to write. The less bullish we are, the lower the strike we want to write. So, that would be, how we decide this. Again, the conversation I'm having with you is not testable because they're just going to say, your customer buys 100 shares of Apple at, whatever. And so this is sometimes called a buy right instead of a covered call. So you do have to be able to identify this strategy because it's testable to know that this is a covered call. Just to be able to tell me on the test, what are you looking at? And you got to say covered call. Even if that wasn't a test question, I'm saying it is. But even if it wasn't, it is. If you can't identify, you don't know what to do next. I mean, you're kind of got to be stuck. You kind of got to say, okay, this is a covered call. Here's what I got to be kind of looking for. So we're going to write 1 Apple. Now we got to decide how long are we willing to obligate ourselves to sell the Apple stock. The longer we agree to sell, the more money we'll get. Lower, higher, longer. Lower, higher, longer. Lower strike call contracts always have greater premiums. Higher strike put contracts always have greater premiums. And where we're at right now, longer term option contracts always have greater premiums. So maybe we decide that we're going to go out to February. So we're going to be obliged to deliver the 100 shares of Apple we own. Huge difference. Not 100 shares of Apple we don't own. You know, you got to be careful here. I can't tell you how many people got hung up because they'll be looking at the tail and not the dog. They'll say, "Oh, it's a naked call." No, 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 no. It's not a naked call. We actually own the stock. The stock is dominant. Whenever we have stock, it's about the stock. It ain't about the option. So you guys say, "Oh, we can buying 100 shares here. We're bullish." So you can't be looking at the call. Oh, short calls are bearish. No, no, no. Short calls are bearish if you don't have the stock. But if you have the stock, that's what dominates. Now we got to decide at what price are we willing to sell the Apple. As I mentioned, a obligation to sell at a lower price will bring in more premium because lower strike call contracts always have greater premiums. Now, this is the disadvantage of this strategy. We're about to put in a ceiling. That's not bueno, right? We're not going to participate past the strike price. And we just own the stock, unlimited gain potential. So one of the disadvantages here is we're about to put in a ceiling at one whatever. Maybe we go for the 190s. So we're going to write one Apple February 190 call. And, you know, Apple, we'll get some juicy premium for this. And the reason we're going to get a juicy premium is because Apple is a pretty volatile stock as compared to the market as a whole. You know, and the premiums on volatile stocks are more. Now, test question. I just told you that Apple is more volatile than the market as a whole. The market on the test is always the S&P 500.
Yeah.
So if you want to sound like a playa, what would you say? What would be that term for stocks that are volatile as compared to the market?
A lower beta, is it? Or...
Higher beta.
Oh, higher beta, sorry.
Yeah, Apple has a higher beta than the market, so it's much more volatile than the S&P 500. Right? So if it had a beta of 2, it'd be twice as volatile. So anyways, we're going to get some good premium for this. And let's say that we can get 8 points for this. You know, and again, I like to kind of say, okay, well, what's going on here? You know, one thing I like to say is, okay, you know, as I told you, a bad part about this strategy, and cover calls are a great strategy. I mean, it's one of the things people do all the time, but we are putting in a ceiling here at 190. Now, we're not going to participate past 190. You know, options are all about floors and ceilings. So, boom, there's our ceiling at 190. And then I told you what I also like to do is just put below the option leg when I'm looking at. This is an obligation to sell the stock at the strike price. And, you know, I always like to kind of do that as part of my process on my scratch paper. So, you know, I'm kind of looking at that. That's all part of what I call my setup. Whenever I have stock and options, I always like to put, okay, this is a bullish transaction because the stock dominates. So, you know, as I said, one of the common kind of mistakes here for people to make is to look at this and tell me that the break even is 198, the max gain is 800, the max loss is unlimited. No, because that is the tail. You can't let the tail wag the dog. The dog is owning the stock. So the next thing I like to do, again, there are lots of different ways to do options, but I like to get my T fired up because what I want to do is net the numbers. Now, an important thing, whenever we have buy, sell, we're going to net. So whether it's a spread, whether it's this covered call, whenever we have buy, we're going to add, or sell, we're going to add. So whenever we have a buy and a sell of an option or stock or whatever, we're going to net. And so this 181 is dollars out, right? That's what we're paying for the Apple. So I'm going to get that in my T. Boom. And that 8 is money in. So I'm going to put that on my T. I'm going to put it on a different line so I can kind of keep straight what's going on here. And then again, we said that you can memorize things. But one thing I told you I like about the T is you don't need to memorize things. So what we're going to be interested in here is the break even. And you can memorize that the break even in a covered call is the stock cost less the premium. This is the one time, and the only one time only is not call up. And the reason it's not call up is because this is not an option position. We paid 181 for the Apple. We brought in 8 points for the option contract, so we lowered our out-of-pocket cost down to 173. Kind of cool. So we did get some price decline protection. Another way we could think of it is we are out 181 for the stock. We brought in 8 points for the option. So we're net out of pocket. We're net out of pocket 173.
And only for a covered call, it's like this.
Only, that's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right? This is the one time. And the reason it's a stock dominant. Now, if you don't want to memorize things, right, you could simply shop your answer set. And by process of elimination, just punch into this thing, the numbers until you punch in one that makes the columns balance, because that's what break even is. Break even is same dollars in as dollars out. So that's another way you could proceed, is you could just plug this in here on the answer set until you get one that makes it work. Right. So you did get some price decline protection. You lowered your out-of-pocket cost from 181 to 173. Kind of cool. All right. So you did get some price decline protection. All right. Well, as we said, what you're going to be asked on the test is max gain, and max loss. And boom. So let's do max gain first. I told you that one of the disadvantage of this covered call is you don't participate past the strike price. So it doesn't matter if I tell you Apple's like 205 or 210. It doesn't matter. The only number that can go in there, that's it.
Yeah.
That's as good as it gets. Now, there's a couple ways to do that. You could just plug the 190 in there. But another way you could think of it is, well, my max gain is going to be the break even to the strike price, right? Because I have to sell the stock at the strike price. So, the most I'm bringing in here is going to be the 190. So another way to think about that is I could just compare that and say, okay, well, the best case scenario here is I'm net out of pocket 173, and the most I can bring in is 190. So another way to think of this is the break even to the strike. Right? The most we're going to make here is what, 17 points? We can either net that or, however we want to do that. But, we're not going to participate. As I said, we're not participating past this strike price. And that is the disadvantage of a covered call, is we don't participate past the strike price. Another way you could do this is you can net the two numbers and say, okay, well, same answer, right? I'm net out of pocket 181 and I bring in 198. And that's another way of saying my max gain is 17 points. So max gain is 1,700, 17 points, or $1,700. And then we said another way to think of that is you could do your T, or you could just say simply, I'm net out of pocket 173, I'd sell 190. Right? But the key point again is you do not participate past the strike price. Now, you're still going to be upset if the stock goes to zero. You're still going to be upset if the stock goes to zero. So if the stock goes to zero, again, you got to be careful here. As I warned you, you got to say, okay, what's bad news here? It's the stock going down because you're a bull. Again, the common mistake, don't know if I should keep telling you common mistake, is for people to say, oh, that's going to be bueno. The stock goes down. I'm short a call. I go, no, that's not going to be bueno. Because what is really driving the transaction is owning the stock.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's good. I mean, you get to keep the 8 points, whoop-de-doo. That's good. But this is not good that the stock is now zero. Now, again, customer isn't going to like this. I said, well, you get to keep the 8, so you didn't really lose 181 there. You lost 173. But that's still, falling down 173 flights of stairs is still painful. The floor is still zero. It's just you're closer to it. Yeah. So your max loss is the break even to zero. Or another way to think of that is $17,300 when Apple goes to zero. Or you could just simply think of it as the break even. However you want to get there, right? We net these two. That's your worst case scenario. And why do you do this? To generate additional income, right? That's why you're doing this. By the way, 3 sources of profit. This sounds pretty good. Covered calls are pretty reasonable. I say, hey, listen, how would you like to start every transaction with a profit? How would you like to get paid hundreds of dollars in advance to agree to sell high stock you just bought low? Somebody will give you $800 to agree to sell Apple at 190 that you bought at 181. And there are 3 sources of profit. 3 sources of profit. One source of profit is the $800. Another source of profit is the difference between 181 and 190. Another 9 points or $900 of profit there. And then you also get any dividends along the way. Those are yours to keep as well. So, covered calls are pretty cool. The disadvantage of a covered call is you do not participate past the strike price. Yeah. You do not participate past the strike price. All right, we got time to show you one last one. So one last one, boom, boom. Okay, so option are all about floors and ceilings. And you say, Dean, I'm a little concerned about these new Apple phones. I said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, Dean, I hear that they are overheating and, that's not good. I said, well, what do you mean they're overheating? Apple has said that they're overheating because of, Uber and the apps. You say, Dean, over the long term, I'm bullish. But over the short term, I'm kind of nervous. And I said, well, what you might want to consider doing is getting some protection. So when you have this stock position, you're either interested in protection or income. I showed you income already. Income means we're going to sell an option. Protection means we're going to buy an option. So what we might want to consider doing is putting in a floor. Right now, the floor is zero. But what we could do is spend some extra money and buy one Apple.
Long put, is that right?
December 180 put at 3. Okay, so again, we got to be real careful here. The common mistake is for people to be going looking at the tail and not the dog.
Yeah.
You can't be looking at that and tell me that's 177. You're a smart bear. You want the stock to go to zero. No, no, no. What you got to look at is say, okay, this is a stock position. And stock always dominates. I'm bullish. If I wasn't bullish, I wouldn't have that stock. And then the other thing I told you I like to do is I like to, underneath the option leg, contract specifications haven't changed. It still means if you're long a put that you have a choice to sell the stock at the strike price. But now you have a choice to sell the strike price stock you actually own. So this is called a hedge. Pretty cool. Hedges are pretty cool. So, what is going on here is we're going to be able to participate in a big price increase, but not participate in a big price decline. Because we're going to have that floor in there. So we're going to pay for the protection. So we're going to pay 3 out. So this is the one time and the one time only that we're adding to get the break even. And the reason we're adding is because this is not a put transaction. We paid 181 for the stock. We paid 3 points for the protection. So our break even is 184. It's going to be the stock cost plus the premium. And the only time it's plus for puts. And the reason it's a plus is because this is not an option position. This is a stock position. And so that's how we get our break even. Hedging is about what if you're wrong. You don't have to sell this stock if you don't want to. You still have unlimited gain potential. Because again, you don't have to sell the stock if you don't want to. Well, I know why sometimes it's here it is. Right. So you don't have to use the protection, It's like insurance again. I don't buy insurance because I plan on wrecking my car. I buy the insurance in case I'm wrong. So I still have unlimited gain potential here because I don't have to do anything if I don't want to. But this is kind of cool. Let's say that Apple, I don't know. As much as they're trying to diversify their supply chain out of China, let's say President Xi shuts down the, Foxconn plant where they're making the iPhones. And let's say those iPhones, the 15s, start spontaneously combusting. Now, remember, I'm a bull. I'm like, oh, my God. And Apple tanks to 100. I'm going to exercise my put and say, I'm out of here. And that's always going to be available to me between now and expiration. And so that's kind of nifty. My maximum loss is going to be the break even to the strike. The most I can lose here is $400. That's pretty cool. I had a doctor client of mine who drove me nuts. We got very lucky. We bought the stock at 90 and the stock went to 180. And I called him, I say, hey, doctor, why don't we buy a 175 put for 4? We'd be out 94, 90 for the stock, 4 points for the protection. And anytime we want, doctor, we could sell the stock at 175. We would have a guaranteed profit. Here I'm using the put to protect the stock position. Well, Dean, do you get a commission for the put? I thought, man, doctor, I'm not even thinking about my commission. If I was after commission, I'd like to put a sell stop at 179.99, get you bumped out of the stock. I just thought it was foolish not to buy the protection. This is the foundation of Mark Cuban's fortune. And Mark Cuban hedged his Yahoo position with puts to sell every share at 90. And when the puts expired, the Yahoo stock was 20. And Mark isn't selling it at 20. If at expiration, the stock is 20 and he's got a choice to sell at 90, he's exercising the puts. And he might pay $200 million in capital gains tax. So again, if I'm your registered option principal and I say, why does your client want to be approved to buy puts? He says, Dean, he doesn't want to buy puts to speculate as a bear. What he wants to do is buy puts on stocks that he wants to hedge in his portfolio. I go, smart man. He's approved, right? So, ROPs are more likely to approve hedgers than other things. All right, well, that was a really great session. So I think. But that was 2 hours. We
Yeah.
got down. I kind of slammed that last one because we were coming up on that. But the deal I make with people, I'll make that deal with you as well. If you are interested in sending me back that video and giving me permission to put it on the YouTube, I'll give you another hour of tutoring for it, because I do think that was a great session that I think people could benefit from, besides yourself. So think that through. If I see the video, I'll know I owe you an hour of tutoring, and then we'll make you famous on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Any
No
other
problem.
comments about today, though?
Yeah, no, that's great. So I actually purchased a note. There are two sessions, or
Oh,
sorry,
wow. Okay. I didn't even see that. So we'll be seeing some more